If you're listening to this, I need you to believe what I'm about to say. I know you won't want to. God, I wouldn't believe myself if I hadn't been there. I know how it sounds, and if anyone from the company ever finds out I recorded this, I'll probably get sued, or worse. But if you're thinking about taking the night shift at Oak Street Complex, or if you already have the job and something feels off, please listen to all of this before you go in alone after midnight. Maybe you've seen the job listing, 3 a.m. security guard needed. No prior experience required. Overnight shifts, quiet building, good pay. Sounds perfect, right? That's what I thought too. I thought it would be a breeze, some YouTube, a thermos of coffee, and a paycheck for walking in circles until the sun came up. I never imagined what I'd really see, what I'd record, what I'd lose. I can't sleep anymore. I barely eat. I haven't spoken to my family in weeks, not really. It got into my head, and I still see it sometimes when I pass a dark window or hear footsteps where there should be none. There are things you should never have to see. I always figured I'd be alone at night, that the building would be the same as in the day, just quieter, emptier. But it isn't. Not really. Not after 3 o'clock. There's something about that hour. Ask any graveyard shift worker, and they'll tell you stories, lights flickering for no reason, doors opening that should be locked, voices in the vents. Most of the time, it's just the building settling or the echoes messing with your head. But what if it isn't? What if something is really there, just out of frame? Before I started, I watched the grainy old security camera footage they made me review for training purposes. Mostly empty halls, janitors, maintenance workers. But now, looking back, I wonder what I missed. What was crawling just beyond the lens? What was standing in the shadows between frames? There's footage I left running that night. I haven't dared watch it all the way through, but I know what happened. I remember what it felt like to be watched, how the monitors would flicker, how sometimes my own reflection didn't look quite right. I've thought about deleting everything, shredding my notes, trying to wake up from this like it was just a bad dream. But it's not a dream, and if you're hearing this, you deserve the truth. You don't know me yet, but you will. You'll understand why I had to warn you, why I can't let this go, even if it costs me everything. I never believed in ghosts, or glitches in reality, or any of that until I saw it for myself. Until it called my name. There are moments, milliseconds, really, where the world slips, and something hungry, something wrong, slips through. That's what happened to me. It started with a flicker on camera 3. It ended with me running out into the cold and never looking back. But the story isn't over, not really. If you listen, really listen, you'll understand why I can never go back. I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you so maybe you'll believe me, so maybe you'll understand what's at risk if you keep working that job alone. My supervisor said I was overworked, that I was just seeing things. The company filed my report and misplaced the tapes. But the things I saw, the things I felt, are burned into me, and if you pay attention, you'll start to notice the signs too. The late-night static over the radios. That hallway you swear is longer in the dark. The sense that you've just missed someone, but no one's there. Don't ignore it. I wish I hadn't. Because some things can find you even when you think you're alone. And once you see it, truly see it, you can never go back to being alone again. That's why I'm recording this, even if I regret every word. Because what I saw at 3 a.m. should not exist. And if you're still listening, you should know. This is only the beginning. I started the graveyard shift at Oak Street Complex in early March, mostly because I needed the money and there weren't many calls back from anywhere else. My previous job, you don't want to hear about that. Layoffs, empty promises, no benefits. I thought the worst part of being a night security guard would be the boredom. Honestly, the first few nights, it almost was. Let me paint the scene for you, because I want you to see it in your mind. Oak Street Complex is 11 stories of glass and concrete, dead smack in the middle of nothing. I mean, it's technically next to a strip mall and some defunct medical offices, but after 10 p.m. it feels like a tomb. There's always this faint hum, as if the building breathes through its heating pipes. Most people only ever see Oak Street when the lobby's full, lights on, the day crowd moving like blood through arteries. Not me. My world is the echo of my own footsteps and the blue glow of 100 little security monitors in a tiny, freezing room. My supervisor, Leonard, is a second-shift lifer, 48, wiry as a coiled cable, and so methodical he makes the clocks look lazy. He introduced me to the night-side handoff, which always felt more like a ritual than procedure. At 10:50 p.m. sharp, Leonard clocks out. By then, the last cleaner's gone, and with a faint groan, the lobby doors click shut behind me. Leonard showed me where we keep the ancient coffee maker that's never quite clean, warned me about the adrift elevators which sometimes stall on their own, and handed over the black radio with a little silver sticker that says, in fading marker, "Don't lose this." Most of the night, I worked solo. There's supposedly another guard 2 floors below in the sub-basement, but in months, I only ever heard his voice over the radio in static bursts, and even then, it was just to confirm alarms or say goodnight. The building's got a strange way of swallowing sound. Some nights, you can hear your own breath, but nothing else for hours. Other times, faint echoes drift up from the mechanical levels, so soft you can't be sure they're real. The routine was simple: 11 p.m., walk the main floors, scanning my badge against the little sensors by every stairwell. Check the restrooms for stragglers. Sweep by the mailroom, pop my head into the darkened conference center, nod at my own reflection in the elevator's stainless steel. If I did everything by the book, I'd be back at the security suite by midnight with a mug of stale coffee and a bag of vending machine chips. The CCTV command center was like the cockpit of a very unglamorous spaceship. 15 little screens stacked in a metal rack, each shot in black and white. Monitors flickering with mild static, only interrupted by the mouse-like movement of the cleaning crew or a moth. I'd sit there, watching nothing mostly, texting my sister jokes or counting how many tiles went missing from the third-floor hallway ceiling. Sometimes I'd try to tell myself scary stories, just to keep my brain awake. But it didn't really work. The scariest thing was usually a janitor who forgot to sign out, or a possum that wriggled under the front doors and set off the motion sensors. On the surface, it was all so ordinary. But I never quite shook the sense that the building wasn't just empty, it was waiting. I brushed it off as my mind playing tricks from too much caffeine and too little sleep. I had my share of odd moments, the echo of footsteps in the HVAC when I was sure I was the only one there, blurry shadows flickering in my peripheral vision while flipping through security feeds. Once, sometime around 2 in the morning, I found every file cabinet in the leasing office pulled slightly ajar. I chalked it up to a lazy cleaner or someone who forgot to lock up, shrugged, and moved on. Other nights had their stories, too. There was Marcella from the day shift, who'd sometimes linger after hours to grade papers on the lobby sofas. "Don't let the poltergeists get you," she'd joke as she left, but her eyes flickered a little too long on those blank windows. Then there was Terrell, my training buddy, who lasted exactly 3 weeks. He never said why he quit, just left a sticky note on my locker that read, "Don't trust the elevators." That first month, though, I was diligent. Every patrol logged, every shadow rationalized. Some nights, when the wind howled, I'd stare too long at camera 4, the one pointed at the basement utility corridor. There were weird dead zones where wireless cameras would freeze, or the feed would lag by a few seconds, but Leonard called it normal interference. Still, I found myself drawn to that one monitor more than the others, as if looking just right would reveal something I was supposed to see. It always came back to that sense, quiet, but insistent, that Oak Street was not as empty as it looked, especially after 3 a.m. The hum of the walls would rise, or the motion sensors would flicker to life with nothing in sight. One Friday night, toward the end of my shift, I was reviewing the recordings from the previous hour when a little flash caught my eye on screen 3. I leaned in, squinting, just a flicker. Something darker than the rest, moving where no one was assigned. It almost looked like. But a radio squawk from the sub-basement startled me into dropping my mug, coffee pooling at my feet before I could hear the entire message. I wiped up the mess, heart thudding, telling myself I must have just imagined it. Maybe the cleaning crew, maybe a system bug. Still, I rewound the tape, feeling a chill prickle on my arms. On playback, there was nothing. Just an empty corridor. Silent, still, as if whatever I'd seen had never truly been there. I told myself I was losing it. But in that moment, I knew I'd be watching more closely from now on. And I had no idea that the next night, that same flicker would start to follow me. After that first flicker, I started to pay attention in a way I hadn't before. I was still telling myself it was nothing, just the usual burnout or maybe the system glitching the way Leonard always said it did. But from that night on, I kept one eye trained on camera 3. I'd find reasons to circle back to the security room in the middle of my rounds and check the feeds. It's amazing how quickly paranoia can become routine, just a few seconds stolen from the clock to see if anything's wrong. The next shift started ordinary. I signed in, waited for Leonard's last "stay awake," and propped open the security suite door for fresh air. I grabbed my badge, checked the grainy screens, nothing but empty hallways, cleaning robots in storage, the vending machines blinking. Just a stack of empty frames boxed in by concrete, selling the illusion of safety. That's how it's supposed to be. But at 2:13 a.m., the main lobby feed glitched, just a little digital hiccup that made every shape swell and blur for half a heartbeat. It caught my eye because it was timed exactly with a sharp, metallic clang echoing down from the vacant stairwell one floor above me. I sat up, heart thumping, and squinted at the playback. Nothing made sense. No motion triggers. Nothing on the logs. I told myself the sound was pipes, the glitch was old code. But from then on, I watched with growing unease as subtle things piled up, drips of strangeness gathering like condensation. When I radioed the sub-basement guard, his voice was sharper than usual, hesitant. He said he hadn't seen or heard a thing. I asked if he ever noticed the cameras lagging. "They do that," he muttered. "Always after midnight. You get used to it." But even through the static, something in his tone made me pause. An unspoken "don't ask." Minutes later, another anomaly, a long, stretching shadow across the empty elevator bank, too tall and too thin for a person. This time I tried to take a screenshot, heart racing as my fingers fumbled with the old keyboard. When I checked the printout, all that showed was a pale smear, like someone had breathed across the lens. I stared at it for longer than I care to admit. Before I could talk myself down, the radio sputtered again, garbled static masking words. I pressed the button, more annoyed than afraid, and called in the usual. "Security, do you copy?" The channel fizzed, fell silent. For almost a minute, I just listened, breath barely stirring. Finally, the other guard's voice crackled through, "You see, never mind. Good night." He cut off so abruptly I knew not to ask. There was a heavy feeling in the air, as if the whole building had sucked in a lungful and was waiting to exhale. When I stepped out to do the next patrol, I found the main stairwell door wedged open with one of the thick rubber mats people use to prop heavy doors. No reason for it, it had been sealed just 30 minutes earlier. My first thought was to blame some night owl from the cleaning crew, but the cleaning staff were long gone by then. I made a note of it, refastened the heavy latch, and started back toward my desk. But the feeling of being watched was unmistakable now. I moved down the hall slower than usual, drawn repeatedly to the silent displays for any hint of movement. Fluorescence gave everything a feverish cast, jagged shadows where the light should have pooled harmlessly. And then, at 3:06 a.m., camera 3 caught something again. A figure in the corner of the basement loading dock, faint, indistinct, like a smudge on the lens, but clearly not a trick of light this time. I stared, forcing my breath to stay even. The figure didn't move, but for a second, I was sure it turned its head to the camera, holding perfectly still as if it knew I was watching. I reached to radio it in and then froze. What could I say? "Hey, there's a blurry shadow in an empty room." I couldn't even trust my own eyes. I waited, watching. After about 10 seconds, the shape simply wasn't there anymore. No walking, no blurring out, just gone, wiped away as if the system had deleted it. I toggled back through the feed, rewinding by the second, hoping for proof. But every frame was clean, untouched. I could feel sweat beading on my palms. You know how your mind works when you're left alone with too much dark and too many screens? It starts running through every story you've ever heard, urban legends, old rumors. I remembered Marcella's teasing, the weird elevator warning from Terrell, the late-night chatter about what happens during the 3 o'clock hour. I never bought into any of that before. But now, every noise behind me sounded like a footstep. Every flicker on the monitors felt like an eye blinking open somewhere inside the concrete. Around 3:30 a.m., I doubled back to the supply closet to check if the cleaning equipment had been moved. Everything was exactly in place, except for the mop. Someone had propped it against the wall facing the door, almost as if blocking the way out. I could have sworn I hadn't left it that way. The longer I worked that night, the more the building pressed in. Not with noise, but with silence, big, echoing quiet that seemed to absorb the clatter of my keys and radio. I told myself I was overtired, hungry, desperate for an excuse to laugh it off in the morning. Maybe at the bar with Marcella, or in the break room where the day shift gossiped and griped. But as I pulled myself back to the security suite for the final time, I glanced again at the stack of monitors. There, quick as a blink, barely more than a digital twitch, one of the elevator doors slid open on its own, and something pale slipped sideways into view. Gone in half a second, nothing left when I replayed the tape, nothing visible in the elevator itself. I shivered all over. At first, I thought it had to be a prank, some leftover hack in the system, or maybe a bored coworker trying to freak me out. That thought didn't last long. Soon, even my worst explanation seemed almost comforting, compared with what my gut was starting to tell me. Because whatever it was watching. And it knew just when to appear. After the second night of glitches and that impossible shape on the monitor, I started carrying my phone everywhere, even inside the stairwells where the signal cut out. I told myself it was just for music or podcasts to keep me awake, but in truth, I needed something familiar, a thread to hold on to when the air grew heavy and the lights buzzed overhead. I started double-checking locks, taking slow walks down the center of each corridor, peering into dark glass doors instead of letting my reflection pass by in a blur. I retraced my patrols, looking for anything out of place, ceiling tiles nudged aside, trash cans emptied too early, the faintest footprints on the vinyl floor. The place felt different, though I couldn't explain why at first. I began to notice it during my third shift in a row. The elevator would arrive on the wrong floor, waiting for me with its doors already open. Once, the button panel flickered between numbers, cycling 13 even though Oak Street only goes up to 11. I stared at the digital display as it glitched, spelling out 333 when it should have been well past 4. As the night stacked up, the corridors started to feel unfamiliar, as though the lines didn't match what I remembered. The 6th floor seemed longer than before, an extra set of doors where there should have been a wall. I tried to laugh it off, sleep deprivation, I told myself, maybe some trick of the emergency lights. But deep down, a knot started forming in my stomach, twisting every time I turned a corner and found a door that should have been locked wide open, or a window left ajar when maintenance sworn it shut every evening. I thought about talking to Leonard. But the unspoken rule was, don't share the weird stuff unless you want the easy shifts taken away. Besides, who wants to be the rookie who loses it on week 3? You're just not used to the hours yet, I'd imagine him saying, voice flat, the way he spoke to people who called in fake emergencies. One night, with adrenaline and curiosity running circles inside me, I followed my routines only halfway. Instead of cutting my patrols short to return to the monitors, I lingered on the upper floors, letting the hush seep into my bones. I counted steps. I measured spaces with my gaze, looking for proof that the floors had grown or shrunk. I found myself drawn to the far end of the 7th floor, where the fire exit is always chained shut from the inside, a cold metal bar pressing against the painted cinder block. But tonight, the lock dangled loose, clicking against the frame in the draft. Beyond the door, only blackness. I hesitated, shining my flashlight down the stairwell. The beam wobbled as I stepped inside, the stairs echoing under my weight in a way that made it sound as if someone or something was matching my pace from below. I paused, heart beating loudly in my chest, and listened. Nothing but distant humming from the voltage room. I shook my head, pushed open the next door, and found myself staring at a corridor I didn't recognize. That was my first real sign that something was wrong with the building, not just with me. Tile underfoot was scuffed in places I didn't remember. There were no room numbers on the doors, only blank plaques. The hallway stretched longer, quieter, filled with a subtle chill. I took a few cautious steps, shining my light down the length of it. Each door I tried was locked tight, except for the last one, which swung open with an oily creak. It revealed only a small, unfinished room, bare concrete, exposed wires, and the metallic smell of water damage. But what really made my skin crawl was the set of muddy footprints, impossibly long stride, far larger than any cleaning crew shoes, leading straight to the far wall. No returning steps, just the prints vanishing into a solid corner. For a moment, I thought about turning back, closing the door, and pretending I'd never been there. But something inside me, a stubborn mix of dread and fascination, pushed me to take a closer look. The wall, at this end, was marked. Not vandalism, just faint, looping scratches, spiraling out from a central point. I stepped closer still and pressed my palm to the cold concrete, half expecting a panel or passageway to give. Nothing happened. But as I turned to leave, I caught my own reflection in the glass of the emergency exit, reflection that lagged a second behind me. I froze. I watched, breath held, as my mirrored self straightened its shoulders a heartbeat late, its face stretched with exhaustion or perhaps something worse. When I finally blinked and looked again, it was normal, just me again, shaking and angry with myself for letting fear get the better of me. The way back felt longer. Every echo returned softer, as if the walls were swallowing sound, refusing to return it. I no longer trusted my memory of the building. Every stairwell was a possibility for strangeness, every hallway a trap. When I re-entered the security suite, I checked the feeds obsessively. Camera 3 was still clean, empty, but now I dreaded its emptiness. The pattern had become a loop, anomaly, investigation, vanishing trail. Like something was baiting me, luring me deeper each time. I tried telling myself, again and again, that none of it mattered as long as I stuck to my rounds. As long as I did things by the book. But part of me knew I'd already failed that test. The building wasn't just sheltering something strange, it was shape-shifting, playing its own cruel game. And though I tried to convince myself I had found all the answers, some part of me knew I had only scratched the surface of a place that should not have existed at all. I used to think I understood fear. The kind you get walking alone at night or staring into a darkened room, heart picking up pace just from not knowing what's inside. But all of that was just theory, childish, manageable. I hadn't tasted the real thing yet. Not until the fourth week, that storm-racked Tuesday when Oak Street became something alive beneath my skin. The rain started early that night. By midnight, the city was streaked in water, the heavy sound of it pounding the panes making everything seem a little more real, a little more closed in. I huddled in the security suite, buried in the blue flicker of the monitors, telling myself that whatever strangeness I'd seen the week before had been nothing, a stray animal, a system bug, my eyes playing tricks in low light. But as the storm raged, so did the building. The lights began to flicker in cycles, humming and popping overhead. I did my best to follow protocol, another circuit, another check of all the badge sensors. On the second floor, I found the conference room open, its table scattered with printouts about emergency drills I'd never attended. The air inside the room was cold. Colder than the rest of the building, my breath fogged a little as I exhaled. I thought it was just bad insulation. Then I saw it, my own login data, printed and circled on a sheet pinned to the corkboard, times and dates highlighted I knew I hadn't put there. Even more, there was a second set of entries, recent, with badge numbers I didn't recognize. The numbers ended only a few minutes before I'd entered the room. Maybe that should have been my cue to get out, to call Leonard, to make the company really investigate. Instead, I told myself it was another part of the late shifts, pranks, the ones everyone shrugs at when you mention them. That denial was my last bit of comfort. Around 2:48 a.m., a notification chimed on the console, another elevator movement, lobby to basement, when I knew I was alone. I watched the feed on 4, lightheaded from too much bad coffee and the aftershock of that cold room. The elevator doors shuttered, closed, reopened 15 seconds later. Out of that brightly lit box stepped a figure in an old maintenance jacket, hunched, gait slow and wrong, like each step was being remembered rather than lived. Despite the harsh fluorescence, its face stayed shadowed, body grainy around the edges, as if the camera lens couldn't quite catch it. I froze. No one should have been down there. I watched as the figure turned, moving into the loading dock. Against every survival instinct, I radioed the basement, no response. I half expected the static to answer me back, but not even the baseline hiss came through. I left the comfort of the suite, badge ready in one hand, club flashlight in the other, jogged down the stairwell 2 at a time. Each floor echoed, uncomfortably empty, reverberating with the storm's distant thunder. By the time I reached the basement loading bay, the air was thick, like it was resisting my every movement. The heavy hydraulic doors were open, puddles of water snaked inside. There's a glass panel at the dock meant for receiving late-night shipments, but at that hour only the storm should have stood outside. Instead, I caught a reflection, someone, something, ducking out of view just as I arrived. "Hello." My voice echoed louder than I meant. "Maintenance? Security check?" No answer. Only the rain, battered harder now. I moved with the cautious confidence of someone who must appear competent on camera, even if he feels like a child inside. I swept the flashlight across the bay, pausing at each dark corner. That's when I noticed two things. First, a wet footprint wider and longer than my own, way too large for Leonard or the day shift. Second, the badge scanner on the wall blinking green, as if someone had recently passed. Following instinct, I stepped onto the loading dock and peered into the alley between buildings. For a second, lightning illuminated everything, and in that flash stood a figure. Not hunched now, but tall, impossibly tall. The jacket hung loosely, unnatural, arms almost to its knees. Its face was still indistinct, somehow blurred despite my direct line of sight. I wanted to speak, wanted to do something that made sense. But just then, the figure turned toward me, and with the next flash, I saw that it wore my own uniform. My name tag. For a moment, it looked directly at me, head cocked, mouth curling into a grin that didn't reach its eyes. All rational thought failed me then. I staggered backwards. The wet footprints led not away to freedom, but deeper into the building, impossibly pointing both directions at once. Just as I turned to run back up the ramp, my radio crackled back to life in a voice I didn't recognize, raspy, familiar, but not quite. It said my name. Hey, short, sharp, as if testing the sound. "Why'd you leave your post, Alex?" I froze. Nobody else called me that here, only my sister did. And nobody should have known I wasn't at my desk except me. The elevator pinged behind me, doors opening onto a totally empty compartment, except, in the mirrored rear wall, a second Alex stared back. Not moving in perfect time. I blinked, tasted metal and fear, and looked away. I ran, heartbeat threatening to break my ribs. Floor after floor, each hallway warped by the night. The building was no longer empty, its air thick with presence. I crashed into the security suite and locked the door, double-checking the bolt. On the monitor, all the feeds showed static except for camera 3, which was fixed on the inside of the security room door, as if someone was watching me from just outside. That's when I realized the logs had been altered. Someone, or something, was on site using my credentials, shadowing my path, moving just ahead or behind. It knew when I'd arrive and when I'd leave. It was never caught fully on camera, always just a step away, except tonight, it let itself be seen that I couldn't stop trembling. My badge buzzed in the scanner, unreadable. The monitors pulsed through blank, gray frames. I replayed the footage over and over, but the moment I saw the figure, every single clip bled into static. And then, my desk phone rang, 3 short rings, then silence. No call ever registered. Only that hour echoing on the clock, 3 a.m. I wanted to scream, to smash the screens and run into the rain. But I was rooted in place, every inch of me electric with terror and certainty. It knew me. It knew my name. And it wanted me to listen. It's strange, the things your brain will cling to when your world starts to come apart. For me, it was the feeling of my badge in my pocket, the solid clunk of boots on tile, the quiet of the security suite. Those were supposed to be anchors, normal, routine, but that night, they became a cruel echo of normalcy as the entire building turned against me. For a while, after the encounter in the loading dock, I couldn't bring myself to leave the security room. I locked the door, checked it 3 times, 4 times, more. I circled the feeds, refreshing each camera, scanning for movement. For the first time in weeks, I wanted someone else in the building, anyone at all, just to break the unending sense of eyes on me. But the radios were dead, a deeper static than usual, the line stone cold to the sub-basement. No click, no hiss, just a hard wall of silence. I tried my cell phone, no bars. I tried the landline, dialing Leonard's number from the call list, then the building's own after-hours maintenance line. Nothing. Not even the courtesy hold music. The phone would ring, but all I got was my own breathing and the hum of fluorescent bulbs. When I hung up, the dial tone was gone, replaced by that same low static that prickled behind my ears. My screens glitched, cycling out of order. Hallways swapped places, elevators flickered from full to empty, some cameras showed only blank, featureless spaces that didn't belong anywhere in the building. Every so often, in these impossible frames, I'd catch a hint of movement, someone just out of view in the leftmost edge of the shot, a hand reaching up to block a camera for one black frame. Always the same size, the same hollow-knuckled fingers. I'd try to rewind and freeze the footage, but somehow, it always skipped. Each time I should have seen a face, the recording cut out, blurring to static as if the film itself recoiled from the truth. Even the comfort of routine failed me. I turned to the daily logs, desperate for some scrap of reality, but they'd been wiped of anything recent. Badge swipes for doors I know I never opened, notes in my handwriting that weren't mine, short, sharp phrases like, "Remember the loops," and "Don't make eye contact." My hands shook as I touched the keyboard. I could feel something building just beyond the edge of sense, a hunger radiating from the screens, the walls, the dark corners. After an hour or so of this dread, with the clock limping toward 3:30, I heard the elevator bell chime again. It was loud, sharp, closer than it should have been. I forced myself to move, unlatching the door and poking into the hallway, flashlight gripped tightly. The corridor was empty, until a shadow flickered at the end, standing motionless near the fire stairs. I nearly called out, but choked it back. Who would answer? Who could? I pressed my back against the wall and listened. After a beat, I heard soft, deliberate footsteps, 1 2, 1 2, calm and precise, as if whoever made them knew exactly where I was. I moved as quietly as I could, ducking into the staff lounge halfway down the hall, praying the sound would recede. But the lights above me flickered and died, plunging me into a darkness broken only by the stormlight flashing through distant windows. That's when I heard it, a voice, perfectly imitating Marcella's. "Hey, you working late again?" she called, light, casual, right outside the door. My mouth went dry. It was her cadence exactly, down to the little upward tilt at the end, but something in the tone was warped, a little too pitch-perfect, too close to my ear, as if she was standing behind me, not outside at all. I turned slowly. My mouth worked, but my throat closed. Cold sweat rolled down my back. "Marcella?" I croaked. Suddenly, the figure stepped into the lounge. She looked just like herself, jeans, blue badge, the cardigan she wore on cold days. But her eyes missed me, sliding past my shoulders, and her smile stretched just a little too wide. I staggered back, bumping the vending machine, and she followed in perfect, soundless steps, never quite blinking. "Rough night," she said, her voice echoing, faintly out of sync with her mouth. "You could come home. If you want to. Everyone misses you." I backed into the far wall, shaking, and saw her reflection in the dark window. The reflection moved a half-second slower than she did. I turned away, heart hammering. "Who are you?" I asked, voice barely my own. She cocked her head, smile never changing, and the lights flickered again, painting a mask of shadow across her face. "You know who I am, Alex. You just forgot." In that moment, the air felt so thick, I could barely stand. I realized this wasn't Marcella, couldn't be, and that my only thought now was escape. I bolted past her, her arms snapping out to catch me, but her fingers passed through my sleeve, cold as ice. I ran out into the hallway, the echo of her voice trailing after me, mocking, "Sweet and wrong, don't go. It's almost time." I blundered into the stairwell, 2 steps at a time as the lights along the wall buzzed and blinked, each landing crawling with shadows. I'd lost all sense of direction, the building warped around me, endless stairs and looping passageways. I passed the same janitor's closet 3 times, each time its door opened a little wider, darkness yawning deeper within. On the 4th pass, I almost didn't stop, but something glimmered from inside, a pale shape hunched over the mop bucket. It was Terrell, or close enough to pretend. He looked up at me, eyes glazed, mouth opening not in surprise, but in rehearsed, mechanical concern. "Hey, Alex. Need help?" His voice was too even, too practiced. Suddenly, I remembered what he'd written on my locker before he quit, "Don't trust the elevators," and a cold realization swept through me. These things were wearing my coworkers' faces, cycling through my memories, picking the details apart to lure me in. I stammered a denial, refusing to meet Terrell's gaze, and fled toward the basement. At every corner, it felt like new doubles joined the chase, Leonard's clipped commands echoing down empty halls, my own voice whispering warnings through the overhead PA, the storm outside growing quieter, the building's own silence swelling in its place. Finally, gasping for breath, I hid in the mailroom, crouched behind a stack of unopened packages. As I tried to steady my breathing, the PA system crackled to life. This time, it was my own voice, perfectly copied and flattened by the old intercom speakers. "Alex, this is where you belong. You don't have to leave. Not ever." Each word stabbed at my sanity, unmooring me, making me doubt every memory of my life in Oak Street, every shift, every moment I thought was mine alone. Then, a footstep right behind me. I spun, flashlight ready to swing, only to see my own face looming out of the dark, mouth moving in perfect unison with mine. "It's okay," it said, voice tender, too knowing. "You'll understand soon. You'll see what I see." I stumbled back, hands shaking, heart thundering so hard the blood roared in my ears. I wanted to scream or fight or run, but all I could do was stare into eyes that were not quite human, not quite right. My double, reached out, hand hovering just above my shoulder, and smiled with an expression I'd never practiced, lips curling back too far, the skin stretched in a way that hurt to look at. What it whispered made me wish I'd never come in that night. It leaned in close, breath cold and sour, and whispered secrets about the building, about what lives behind the walls at 3 a.m., about all the others who had come before me and lost themselves inside its endless hallways. "I can show you what's beneath," it said. "I can show you what you really are." I snapped. I lunged past it, crashing through the double's form as if breaking through a dense cloud of ice water. My thoughts dissolved in panic. I lost track of direction, maybe even time, bolting down unseen passageways as all the lights failed, as all the air seemed to collapse, as the looping, mocking voices trailed behind me, calling my name in every cadence I've ever known. I ran until there was nowhere left to run, until the endless corridor bent sharply and I staggered through a door that shouldn't have existed, a door with my own nameplate on it. The inside was wrong, unfinished, filled with darkness that felt thick as clay. As I whirled, panting, the door slammed itself shut behind me, and the voices outside grew muffled and distant, replaced by silence so deep it pressed on my chest. I was alone again, but I knew nothing was over. Not by a long shot. I could hear the double's whisper echoing inside my thoughts. "You're part of it now, Alex. It's part of you." And in that darkness, as frantic as I was for any way out, I understood. I would have to face what waited here, or vanish like all the others I'd never met. When I write about what happened next, it feels like remembering a nightmare, everything blurred and breathless, whole minutes lost to a fog that may never clear. I stood trembling inside that impossible room, the one marked with my own name, a mash of every break room and supply closet I'd ever passed in Oak Street. The air was cold, prickling my skin, with the faint smell of rain and something fouler, like mold and ozone. Through the pulse of my own heartbeat, I listened for movement. All I heard was the echo of what the double had whispered, the rhythm of my own ragged breaths. But I couldn't stay. Every nerve in my body screamed it, "Move. Go. Before it finds you again." I forced my limbs into action, fumbling for my phone, battery drained, screen dead. No windows, just one flickering fluorescent overhead, buzzing like an injured insect. I tried the handle. Locked, of course. Panic surged. I slammed my fists against the door, shouting, "Let me out." My voice bounced off the walls and fell flat, as if the room itself was swallowing sound. Then, in the far corner, I saw something that didn't belong, thin line of light, trembling along the baseboards, just wide enough for fingers. Desperate, I crawled over and pried at it. The wall gave way under my touch, peeling back like cheap drywall. Beyond it, I glimpsed a maintenance crawlspace, the filth and insulation exposed, wires snaking overhead. I wriggled in, dragging myself through the dust and dark. The space seemed endless, bending left, then steeply upward, the ground slanting dizzyingly beneath my knees. Behind me, I could hear something slithering, soft, shuffling, almost a whisper of movement. I pressed forward, every inch scraping my skin, jacket torn, sweat freezing on my arms. I thought about stopping, letting it catch me, whatever it was. But some stubborn survival spark carried me on. I don't know how long I crawled, but eventually I spilled back into the building proper, tumbling into the second-floor electrical closet. I slammed the steel door behind me, hands shaking as I wedged a broom into the handle. Fluorescent light flickered again, a broken strobe. I heard voices out in the hallway, my voice, Marcella's laughter, Leonard's clipped instructions, and forced myself not to listen, not to follow. I peered around, searching for any tool, anything to use. That's when I spotted the old breaker panel, the one facilities used to reset whole sections of the building. A desperate idea came to me: if the thing moved through the circuit, the cameras, the radios, maybe I could chase it out, force it into the open. Or maybe just give myself a head start. I yanked the main breakers, plunging every hallway and office into pitch black, the building humming louder, walls vibrating in protest. Suddenly, the voices shifted. No longer invitation, but anger, static-laced, hundreds of iterations of my own voice echoing, "Turn it back on, Alex. Don't make us come find you." I ran, heart slamming, following the pale rectangles of emergency exit lights. All the familiar landmarks were wrong, signage twisted, stairwells looping back. I took the fire stairs, fingers trailing the rail, racing downward. Every landing felt colder than the last, the steps warping beneath my feet. Once, I glimpsed the double at the next turn, waiting patiently, head tilted, eyes like burn marks in a photograph. I forced myself past, barreling out into the lobby. The revolving door jammed. My badge was useless. I hurled myself at the glass, shoulder aching as the pain fractured but refused to break. Panic swelling, I scanned the front desk, the big metal emergency override box. I found the key taped underneath Leonard's old trick, always mocked in training, and jammed it into the slot. The alarm blared, an awful, car horn howl shattering the silence. It worked. Every emergency door unlocked at once, bolts thumping open, red lights flashing, klaxons screeching. Through the glass, I saw the outside world again, rain-glossed streets, the distant taillights of a delivery truck, the hard, gray promise of freedom. I ran. I didn't look back. I sprinted through the cold, bareheaded, every sense screaming. My memory of what happened next is fragmented, slick concrete, shoes slapping puddles, air burning in my lungs. At some point, I tripped, smashed my head against a curb, and lay gasping, blood hot and salty in my mouth. The police found me at sunrise, half frozen, soaking wet, security jacket inside out. They didn't know what to make of me. I babbled about doubles and monsters, about people with wrong faces. They nodded, tight-lipped, and muttered about stress, exhaustion, paranoia. Someone packed my scalp and patched my arm. I heard snippets, employee incident, not criminal, do you know if he's on any medication? Just needed a break, these night guys. They took my statement but didn't write down half of it. When Leonard came by the hospital, he barely looked me in the eye. I asked about the building, if anyone else reported anything. He shook his head, patted my shoulder, and sighed. It happens to some folks, he said quietly. It's just a lot of hours, son. Get some rest. Don't worry about coming back. But I knew I hadn't left it behind. My memories weren't clear, some faces missing, whole pieces of my routine wiped away, like a tape recording overwritten with static. Even after leaving the hospital, I'd wake in the night sweating, sure I'd hear my name whispered in a voice that almost sounded like mine, or glancing at a window and seeing a reflection a moment too slow. I barely survived, but I'd seen what lived behind the glass and wire at Oak Street. It had let me go, maybe as a warning, maybe for reasons I'd never understand. But it wasn't done. Somehow, I just knew. And I knew it wasn't just waiting in that place. It was waiting for anyone who wandered too close, curious, tired, and alone. Because some doors, once opened, never really close. And something always slips through. After what happened, reality seemed thinner. Like I'd returned, but only halfway, half of me always listening for voices in the radio static, waiting for the hallway lights to flicker. The first few days felt like a fever that wouldn't break. I stayed at my sister's apartment, blinds drawn tight. I found myself checking locks 3 times before bed. Some nights I'd prop a chair under the handle and keep the lamp on until sunrise, afraid of what I'd see in the shadow of my own doorway. The company called twice. First it was HR, chipper and practiced, asking if I'd be willing to complete a post-incident evaluation. I explained, tried to explain, what I'd seen and heard. They responded with carefully chosen words, fatigue, misperception, just a tough shift. The woman on the other end said they'd retrieve my final report, check camera logs, review all files. She assured me nothing unusual had been found. In our review, all equipment was fully operational. No indicators of malfunction or tampering. She recommended I speak to their mental health consultant, as if my horror had been nothing but a glitch in my own mind. That stung in ways I didn't expect. Days passed. The official incident report, when it arrived by mail, was less than a page, a list of times and locations, the words, "Employee was disoriented," no witnesses, no physical evidence. Just before I tossed it, I saw one handwritten note in the margin, "No digital footage available, system error." No further action. No footage. My skin went cold when I read that. Oak Street records everything, always. There should have been hours of logs. I spent a night wondering if maybe, at my lowest, I'd deleted the evidence myself, somehow, forgotten the very act, as if the thing still lived inside my memory, rewriting the story to protect itself. Or maybe someone else had taken care of it, as quietly as possible. I tried calling Leonard. He picked up once. When I asked if he'd ever seen anything during his rounds, there was a long pause. "That's just a tough building," he finally said, voice too gentle. "Let it go, Alex. Don't look back. You'll feel better if you just leave it behind." Leave it behind. I wanted to believe I could. But my hands shook when I held a cup of coffee, the taste suddenly wrong, bitter as that night. Sleeping didn't come easy. I'd jolt awake certain someone was in my room, myself, or a stranger with my face. I kept thinking I heard Marcella's laugh from out in the hallway. Sometimes, on certain nights, I'd replay the building's blueprints in my head, tracing shadow routes, trying to remember every exit and closet, testing my memory for cracks. Isolation crept in, thick and heavy. My sister tiptoed around my mood, asking if I'd had nightmares, if maybe I should talk to someone. I tried. I made an appointment with a therapist. Sat in a waiting room with bright lights and fake plants, telling myself, just say stress, just say burnout. But when he prompted me to elaborate, I felt myself shrinking, unsure I even remembered it right, gaslighting myself with each retelling. I joked, working nights at Oak Street. That's enough to make anyone see things. He smiled politely and wrote notes I didn't see. Fragmented memories were the worst. I'd remember a janitor walking ahead of me into the stairwell, but couldn't picture his face. I'd recall the elevator stopping on the wrong floor, but not whether I was entering or leaving. Once, I caught my own reflection in a shop window and, just for an instant, it lagged a beat before catching up. I spun, heart pounding, but there was nothing behind me except ordinary city air. Then came the signs that maybe I wasn't alone after all. Months later, I got a letter, no return address, just my name. Inside was a single sheet, a printout of a camera feed, Oak Street's lobby, time-stamped weeks after I'd left. In the bottom right corner, a figure stood in the dark, too blurry for detail, but wearing a security jacket, hands clasped behind its back. No message. No explanation. But underneath, scrawled in thick black ink, were two words I recognized: "You remember." Sometimes I'd catch headlines in the local paper: "Short staff at Oak Street Complex. Another night guard quits." Each article was always worded carefully, downplaying anything unusual. But I noticed a pattern: nobody ever stayed long. Some, like me, left suddenly after a short time. No quotes from them. Just a list of names that faded from the story by the next week. Once, while walking past the building on a rainy evening, I saw someone in the lobby, slumped behind the front desk. For a second, I thought it was me, same tired eyes, same hunched posture. Our gazes met through the glass. I watched as he looked away, almost ashamed. When I tried reaching out to Marcella and Terrell, neither answered. Marcella's number was disconnected. Terrell's online profile was a ghost: no last posts, no updates. It was like the late shift had erased us, one by one. At least a few times, I tried to write this all down, just to get it out, to make it real. But every draft seemed to dwindle into jagged, uncertain paragraphs about faded faces and doorways that no longer matched my memories. Dreamlike, the therapist called it. Protective amnesia, maybe. But the anxiety never eased. At my desk, I'd find myself clutching my badge, flipping it over and over, searching the ridges for some proof of who I'd been and what I'd survived. Why hasn't anyone believed me? The building's still there. The job posting still goes up every few months, 3 a.m. security needed. No prior experience. I keep wanting to warn the next person who applies. But even now, I'm not sure how. All I know is this: I saw something that should not exist. And if you ever find yourself working that shift, don't ignore the flickers, the shadows, the faces you're sure you recognize. Sometimes, I lie awake, wondering if I ever really left the building, or if I'm just a shadow clinging to some endless, looping hallway in Oak Street, waiting to be believed. If you've made it this far, if you've bothered to listen at all, it's probably already too late for advice. But still, I have to try. Maybe you're alone right now, sitting at an empty desk lit by the blue wash of security screens, thinking this is just another late shift. Maybe you're about to walk into Oak Street for the first time, or somewhere just like it. You might even be scrolling the job boards, considering the graveyard, thinking nothing of the odd hours or the weird turnover. Maybe you laughed at the stories. I would have, too. So let me tell you the only truth I'm still sure about. If you ever have to work nights, and something feels off, something flickers in the monitor, or you hear footsteps when you're sure nobody's there, don't wait for an explanation. Don't try to prove you're brave. Don't tell yourself the strange belongs to someone else, or that it's just in your head. You'd be wrong. Sometimes the strangest things are real, and the most ordinary places are the ones that want you the most. I lost more than my job in Oak Street. I lost the part of myself that trusted the world to be solid, rational, safe. I lost friends, maybe more than that, though I still wake up at night, trying to remember faces that have already faded. Every time I glance into a dark monitor, I feel a twinge of cold in my gut, as if the building is looking right back at me. I see it sometimes even now, my own hands lagging behind on a screen, or a shape in a reflection that doesn't belong. I turn the camera off and wait for daylight. I haven't told you everything, not because I'm holding back, but because I can't. There are hours washed from my memory, footage the company erased, details that won't come out in the right order. I never did figure out what that thing wanted, or why it chose me. Maybe it was just hungry. Maybe it's waiting for someone else to wander close, someone who'll stay through the long hours and ignore the warnings. Maybe you. If you ever find old footage labeled 3 a.m., don't watch it. If you see your own face smiling out of an elevator camera, look away. And if you hear someone say your name, when you know you're alone, run. Because it's still there. Watching. And who knows, maybe now it knows your name too.